Hi students, welcome to yet another session of my class reading fiction. We are discussing different types of novel. Today we are going to discuss about utopian and dystopian novel, science fiction novel, detective fiction and creative non-fiction. Let us discuss in detail. Yes, utopian and dystopian novel. What do you mean by this utopian and dystopian novel? Utopian literature critiques the society in which the author lives by presenting an ideal society. Utopian literature means it critiques the society in which the author lives by presenting an ideal society. So utopia, the word utopia means it is a group of, it is an imagined community. The imagined community in the sense means the people are presented in a perfect way. That is, imagine society within which everything is perfect, equality, and that is an imagined place or state of things in which everything is perfect. That is the word meaning utopia. So utopian literature critiques the society in which author lives by presenting. So here author is trying to portray an imagined society. Imagined community or society means idealized world. It is a type of fiction in which the author is trying to present everything in a perfect manner or idealized world. Actually, the author set the narrative in such a way in an imagined community to express his or her own ethos, etc. Such type of literature is called utopian literature, that it critiques the society in which author lives by presenting an ideal society. But dystopian literature, on the other hand, provides a warning by presenting an alarmingly unpleasant vision of the future. Actually, dystopian literature, it is just opposite to this utopian literature. It is otherwise called anti-utopian because it presents or it provides a warning by presenting an alarmingly unpleasant vision of the future. In dystopian literature, the author tried to portray an unpleasant voice of the future. That means some nightmare things that will be going on in the future. That is, he is trying to portray in such type of literature, dystopian literature. It provides a warning by presenting an alarmingly unpleasant voice of the. That means some things that frightened us. Such type of elements he is included, he or she, that is the author included in their writings. Such type of literature are called dystopian literature. So once again I repeat, utopian literature critiques the society in which author lives by presenting an ideal society. It is a type of fiction that representing an idealized society or community. Dystopian is just opposite to utopian. It is anti-utopian in the sense means it provides a warning by presenting an alarmingly unpleasant vision of the future. Then, utopia is an ideal place. The word utopia or the word represent utopia is an ideal place. The term was derived from St. Thomas More's Latin work Utopia. Actually, utopia, the term was derived from Saint Thomas More's Latin work Utopia, that is a 15th, not 16th century writer, but the idea can be traced back to Plato's Republic, that is 14th century BC. The idea of imagined community, that is idealized state. More, that is Thomas More got that idea, traced this idea from Plato's Republic. Republic is a work by famous work by Plato, and he belonged to 14th century BC. And Thomas More tried to trace this idea from Plato's Republic, and the term was utopia. The term was derived from Thomas More's Latin work named Utopia, and the term was a pun on two Greek words, Utops means good place and autops means no place. So the term was a pun on two Greek words. One is utops, which means good place, and autops means no place. Plato longs for a world where philosopher kings rule and such things as religion, poetry, family, and so on are given less importance. Actually, according to Plato, Plato longs for a world where philosopher kings rule. That is the origin of the idea or the term utopia. I already told you Thomas More got this idea from Plato's Republic. That is regarding utopia or utopian literature. Not literature utopia. The term utopia that it represents ideal place and the idea can be traced back to Plato's Republic. And Plato longs for a world he wishes or Plato longs for a world where philosopher kings rule and such things as that is religion, poetry, family and so on are given less importance in a society. And Moore's utopia is a more benign one, with a tolerance towards religion and contempt for money. Actually, Plato's idea was like that. That is, he longed for a world where philosopher kings rule and did not give much importance to religion, poetry, family, and other things in the society. But More polished this idea. Thomas More polished this idea. That is, most utopia is a polished one. That means with tolerance towards religion and contempt for money. Examples of literary utopias can be found in Tommaso Campanella's City of the Sun, Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, then Edward Bellamy's Looking Backward, Samuel Butler's Erewhon, William Morris' News from Nowhere, H.G. Wells' A Modern Utopia, etc. All these are examples for utopian literature, utopian novels. So in short, we can say that utopian literature or utopian literature, it represents an imagined community that is a group of people. It is an imagined community in which everything will be perfect or all people are equal, in an equal state. Such type of notions are highlighted in utopian literature. Actually, this type of idea or this type of society does not exist in reality. It is from our common sense we can understand that utopian society does not exist in reality. That is, everything will be perfect, everything will be in an idealized state, etc. That is not possible in our reality. And this idea Thomas More got from Plato's Republic, and according to Plato, yes, he longs for a world where philosopher king rules and no place for religion, poetry, family, etc. But Thomas More polished this idea by saying that some tolerance towards religion and contempt or like hatred or contempt for money, etc. That means a perfect idealized equals equality is a state with all citizens are equal. That is the notion highlighted in the utopian. Actually, that does not exist in a reality or real world. Then dystopian, I already told you it is otherwise called anti-utopian, that is just opposite to utopian. So 20th century was more skeptical of these ideal societies and scared of totalitarian power control. This led to the popularity of the anti-utopian or the dystopian novel. That is 20th century modern literature was more skeptical of these ideal societies and they were scared of totalitarian thought control, and this led to the yes, and this led to the popularity of the anti-utopian or dystopian novel. The major examples are Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, George Orwell's 1984. 1984 is a work by George Orwell. And many dystopian novels have elements of the science fiction in them, and they portray the future as a nightmare where the world is taken over by machines. Yes, many of the 20th century dystopian novels have elements of the science fiction. We can trace the elements of science fiction in Yes, elements of science fiction in dystopian novels, and they try to portray the future as a nightmare. That is, I already told you in the introduction, that is, presenting an alarmingly unpleasant voice of the future. That is, portray the future as a nightmare where the world is taken over by machines. That is, dystopian novel. Next, we are going to discuss about science fiction novel. What do you mean by science fiction novel? From the title itself, we can understand that it is something related with science. Yes, it is a genre of fiction in which stories tell about science and technology of the future. So, it is the stories related with the science and technology of the future. The tendency of the human beings to walk past was fulfilled in Gothic and historical forms of the novel. Yes, we already discussed Gothic and historical novel, and we know that what are the characteristic features of Gothic novel and the historical novel. So the tendency of the human beings to walk past that was fulfilled in two different forms of novel, that is gothic and historical novel. At the same time, science fiction, it cruises or it focuses into the realms of future. It focuses about the science and technology of the future. From the title itself, we can understand that it is something related with the science and technology. Then interstellar travel. Interstellar means travel in between stars or other planetary systems. That is something related with the space. Then altered states of consciousness. Altered means wavering or changing state of our consciousness. Then extraterrestrial visitors to Earth. Extraterrestrial in the sense means that is happening or coming or existing beyond the planet. Extraterrestrial visitors to Earth and artificial intelligence are the key features of science fiction. Then critics have noted that science fiction evokes Gothic writing with its interest in the speculative and the monstrous. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is an example, is considered to be one of the earliest science fiction novels. Not that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, it is considered to be one of the earliest science fiction novels. And then this novel tells the story of a man-made monster taking on godlike superpower, leading to disaster, which is a tragedy of science gone too far. That is the theme of that novel, Frankenstein. It is the novel tells the story of a man-made monster taking on godlike power, superpower, leading to disaster. Then Jules Verne also wrote path-breaking science fiction novels like Voyage to the Center of the Earth and Around the World in 80 Days, etc., introducing the theme of exploration through technology. But H.G. Wells is often credited as the father of science fiction. Yes, H.G. Wells is known as or credited as the father of who is known as the father of science fiction, H.G. Wells. He is often credited as the father of science fiction as he was a trained scientist. Why he is called father of science fiction? Because he was a trained scientist and an accomplished novelist. That's why he called the father of science fiction. And Wells wrote The Time Machine, which depicted time travel. That is the theme of that work. The depiction of time travel. Then The War of the Worlds, which was a prototype of alien invasion fiction. Then The First Men on the Moon, and called all these works as scientific romances. All these works are scientific romances. Then though science fiction was initially considered to be pulp fiction, yes, in the initial time period, it was considered as pulp fiction. With the emergence of writers like Aldous Huxley and C.S. Lewis, the form was accepted as a major genre of literature. Yes, at the initial period, it was considered just as a pulp fiction. Later, with the introduction of Aldous Huxley, his Brave New World, and C.S. Lewis, Out of the Silent Planet, with the coming of these writers and their works, the form, this science fiction novel was accepted as a major genre of literature. Then, after the Second World War, the fantastical world of science fiction began to look more and more real. Yes, after the second, that is in the postmodern world or post World War era, the fantastical world of science fiction began to look more and more real. Nuclear warfare and space exploration helped the genre attain rapid popularity. We all know that nuclear warfare and space exploration that helped this particular genre, that is the particular form of fiction, that is science fiction, attained rapid popularity. Major writers of the genre post World War were Arthur Clarke, his Childhood's End, Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughter's House 5, etc. are, yes, major writers of this genre. Recent innovations in the genre include Octavia Butler's Kindred, in which a 20th century American black woman time travels back to the 1830s, where she lives as a free black in a slave state. Then William Gibson's Neuromancer, which introduces cyberspace into the world of science fiction. Yes, and not that name William Gibson's his work Neuromancer, which introduces cyberspace into the world of science fiction. Then science fiction is usually abbreviated to SF. Most of the time, this science fiction novel, it is abbreviated to SF, capital letter SF, and the alternative sci-fi. Sci-fi is frowned upon by its devotees. Then American science fiction magazines, among them Astounding Science Fiction. It's an American magazine, provided an excellent platform for the writers of this genre. The best known of American science fiction writers are Theodore Sturgeon, Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, and Robert Heinlein began their careers through these magazines, these American magazines like Astounding Science Fiction, etc. I think all of you understand what you mean by science fiction novel. Next is detective fiction. What do you mean by detective fiction? I think all of you are very familiar with this term detective novels, detective, etc. Let us look into the definition. What do you mean by detective fiction? Detective fiction or crime fiction forms a branch of fiction which presents a mysterious event or crime. At first, it presents a mysterious event or crime, usually, but not necessarily a murder. At first, concealing the solution from the reader. Yes, in the initial part of the fiction, yes, the solution for that particular problem, it was concealed from the reader, but finally reveal it through the successful investigation of a detective. That is in the form of a detective model. What do you mean by detective fiction? Detective fiction or crime fiction forms a branch of fiction which presents a mysterious event or crime, usually, but not necessarily a murder or something like that. And at first, concealing the solution from the reader, but finally revealing that it through the successful investigation of a detective. Such type of novels are called detective fiction. The history of the form starts from the 19th century. Yes, this particular literary form, the history of this form starts from the 19th century with Edgar Allan Poe, the American short story writer and poet, who brought all the ingredients together in his Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, first published in 1840. It is important. The history of the form was traced back to 19th century American short story and poet, short story writer, and as well as a poet, that is Edgar Allan Poe, who brought all the ingredients, all the elements of a detective fiction together in his work named Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, first published in 1840. He is also attributed to having created the first fictional detective, August Dupin, who appears in one of the most representative detective stories of Edgar Allan Poe, that is in the Purloined Letter. Purloined Letter is another work by Edgar Allan Poe, and he is one who attributed to having created the first fictional detective character named Auguste Dupin, who appears in this particular work, that is the Purloined Letter, and it is one of the most representative detective stories of Edgar Allan Poe. Detective stories became more popular in the late 1880s with the coming of Sherlock Holmes of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The immortal companion to Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, is also Arthur Doyle's creation. Then the English writer G.K. Chesterton, that is early half of the 20th century, became equally popular with his detective stories centered on the detective priest named Father Brown. This period, that is this period of G.K. Chesterton, that is early half of the 20th century. This period is also referred to as the golden age of the detective story. That is 20th century literature. That period is also referred to as 20th century period. That early half of the 20th century. That is also referred to as the golden age of the detective story, thanks mainly to the English writer Agatha Christie, because with the publication of novels by Agatha Christie, it became popular. This particular literary form became popular. Her Poirot is accepted as the most long-lived detective characters ever created. That's why um, uh, here highlighted the writer, English writer Agatha Christie. Her Hercule Poirot is accepted as the most long-lived detective characters ever created. And Agatha Christie's works, including The Mousetrap, a murder mystery play, recorded as the longest running play in the history of the theatre. Another work by Agatha Christie, that is The Mousetrap. It is considered as a murder mystery play, recorded as the longest running play in the history of the theatre. And her works have become enriched by her skill in making the least likely suspect turn out to be the actual murderer. Then the crime novel on the crime, criminal and the psychological working of the central and the police novel are newer varieties of this form. That is, the crime novel and the police novel are newer varieties of detective fiction. One contemporary example is the Scottish writer Ian Rankin's novels featuring the character Inspector Rebus is an example for this newer forms. Contemporary example, present example. I think all of you understand detective fiction. It is a crime fiction, and history of the form starts from the 19th century with the Edgar Allan Poe, that is American short story writer as well as a poet. His publication of the work named Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque in 1840, and it became popular in late 1880s with the coming of Sherlock Holmes, and in English writer G.K. Chesterton, that is early half of the 20th century, it became equally popular, and this period is also referred to as the golden age of the detective story. Hope all of you understand detective fiction. Next one is creative non-fiction, and this is the last one in the different types of novel, creative non-fiction. from the title itself, that is non-fiction. What do you mean by non-fiction? Non-fiction means it's a writing other than fiction. That means the writings like informative writings or related with the real incidents or facts, etc. That means we get some information from such type of writings. That means writings other than fiction. That is called non-fiction. So we are discussing creative non-fiction. So it is a genre of writing, that is, it is a type of writing that uses literary style and technique in narratives which are normally termed non-fiction. So it is a type of writing that uses literary style and technique in narratives. Then forms within this genre are biography. So there are some other writings that included in this particular genre. They are biographical writings, food writing, literary journalism, memoirs, and travel writing. All these included in the term creative nonfiction. Then Barbara Lounsbury in her book The Art of Fact suggests four characteristics of the genre. Yes, Barbara in her book named The Art of Fact, she suggests four characteristics of the genre, that is creative nonfiction. One is documental documentable subject matter which is from the real world. Yes, that is the depiction of documentable subject matter. That means something related with the real incidents or reality, fact, etc. So depiction of a documentable subject matter which is from the real world. Then exhaustive research. Exhaustive research in the sense means descriptive or thought provoking or in a detailed manner. That means we get information, etc., something from the exhaustive research. So, documental subject matter, which is from the real world, exhaustive research, then the scene. That is the importance of describing the context of the piece in contrast to the objectivity that journalism seems to profess. The scene in the sense means the importance of describing the context, the importance of describing that particular context of the piece in contrast to, that is in distinct to the objectivity. That objectivity is the characteristics that journalistic writings put forward. So objectivity, that means without any prejudice or bias, that means in a just justifiable manner. So to the objectivity that journalism seems to profess, that is the scene here defined. That is the importance of describing the context of the piece in contrast to the objectivity that journalism seems to profess. And the final feature being, and the last one is fine writing or literalness of the pose. These four characteristics that Barbara Lounsbury highlighted in her book The Art of Fact regarding creative nonfiction. Thus, the genre merges non-fiction with the aesthetics of literature. Thus, this particular type of writing merges or clubbing non-fictional characteristics with the aesthetics of literature by ensuring it emerges from verifiable facts and also by employing a literary style. Yes, it emerges from verifiable, that is a depiction of real realities or facts or informative elements along with it, and also by employing a proper literary style to the writings. That is, it emerges, it is mingling of that non-fictional elements with the aesthetics of literature along with the proper literary style, that is creative non-fiction. I think all of you understand this session, and we completed different types of novel, and next we are going to discuss these narrative strategies in fiction, and that we will be continued in the next session. Uh, Thank you. And there is a homework for you. The homework is write a note on the genre that we studied today. that is utopian and dystopian novel, science fiction novel, detective fiction, and the last one is creative non-fiction. Thus, we completed all the different types of novel in this module. I think all of you understand the session. Write your homework and send back to me. Thank you. Have a nice day. See you again.